On the community side, you need to pull out and dust off that comprehensive plan. Does it have target areas? Have you begun a conversation about the International Property Maintenance Code? Do you have zoning and code enforcement? If you answer no to any of those things, it is time to revisit your comp plan and have a conversation about where you go from here, because those are the conversations that build capacity in your community, and they show the grant programs that you're applying for that you are serious about cleaning up your community and the housing stock that you have there. And I'm talking about your CDBG funds. I'm talking about your CHIP applications. I'm not just talking about LIHTC and HOMEARP. All your applications across the board. You are going to compete better when you know what your plan is and you work your plan. And you don't try to fit this pot of money into this and that pot of money into there. And yeah, we're not sure. Build your plan and then start looking for what are the funds that I can start to apply for that help build out my plan that's mission driven. And for this, I'm speaking specifically to your leadership in your community. We have to start looking at community development as a balancing tool for economic development. You can apply the same Downtown Development Authority, Industrial Development Authority training to community development. If you want people to invest in your community, whether we are talking about a subdivision at the highest end of the spectrum, or we're talking about affordable housing, if you want someone to invest in your community, you need to make sure that you are competing well against all the other communities that they may be looking at. Don't give them a reason to cut your community off the list. So what does that mean? It means it needs to be clean. It needs to be walkable. You need to have a quality of life initiative that looks at, do you have signage? Do you have, beautification? Show people you are proud of the place that you live. It's not a function of money. It's a function of effort. And so you want to make sure that you're putting as much forethought into the community development side, which is housing, amenities, all the things that go into providing government services are on the community development side. You want to balance that the same way you do with economic development, because those are two pieces that make the whole. When you are trying to bring in, an employer and increase jobs in your community, not only are they looking for the industrial site, not only are they looking for a shovel-ready location, they're also looking for the quality of life for their employees and where they're going to live, the school systems that their kids are going to go to, and what initiatives that community is putting in place to make that a good place to raise children and to live and to retire in. And then finally, market your community. Figure out what makes your community unique and make sure that you are putting good messages about your community out on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram, more than just your local newspaper or your radio station. Make sure that you are pushing out all of the good news that you can about your community, and that you are putting your best foot forward from a marketing perspective, because people are looking before they ever get to the county line. They are going online, they are looking at what they find, they are Googling your community for community development the same way they do about economic development. So you want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward online. And if there are things that you don't control that are negative on the internet about your community, that there's just as much or more information that you are pushing out that is positive about your community.
And Kelly, can I add something to this?
Of course.
So, and going back to the data informed piece, also with what Kelly had just mentioned, For the leaders out there who may be on this particular call, your community agencies also have a lot of data for you. So if you look at your community action agencies, it's not just the school systems that have that information. So in order to look at need in the community, your homeless programs, maybe working with the coordinated entry system and the homeless management information system, your community action agencies, they're the boots on the ground who have a lot of information and can let you know what some of the needs really are, because they actually have the data in their databases in order to provide that to you. Now, those individuals, though, speaking now to the agencies, you got to make sure you have good data. So please be sure the only way that you can, to the leaders, to let them know that you have a need is if you actually come to them with the accurate data of the people that you're helping. And so you can actually have the numbers, the percentages to let them know how many people are coming through your doors, how much money you're giving out to everyone, what the pervasive needs are for everyone who comes and sits in front of you. That information is really important. So using those databases, and sometimes it may be, I know it's hard. There's a lot of work going on, and doing that extra little admin piece seems to be a burden, but it's really important when trying to get the information out about what you need. This is also important for your applications. Okay, so when you're putting together all this information, you actually have the data of who you're helping and how and when, and the times of the year when it's more important, all the bits and pieces around what is needed in your community. So be sure to record that data. And if you don't have a database, Excel does wonders if you just know some of the basics. So just, try and put something together to get the data in one place. The other thing too is with regards to the data informed marketing. That's a great opportunity to also let them know what the need is, to show the percentage. If you recall the map that Kelly brought up, that is a great picture of what's going on in the state of Georgia. If you can create a picture, if you can create an easy way to know what's going on, both positive and at times not so positive, that's super informational. So, and then that can be built into the comprehensive plans and the community development pieces and the economic development pieces, because you know what your assets are, you know what your weaknesses are, and you know how to kind of go through those different pieces to make sure that everyone's collaborating together and putting together your community that's to do an even better job than what you've done before, because I know y'all are working hard. And then lastly, my shameless plug, DCA does an economic development tool or class every, I think it's once a year for every region in our state. So we have several classes going on throughout the year. That, if you can't do GIC, do the economic development program that's open to the community, okay? And so, because it's only 5 for GIC. So the economic development model will actually help with everything that Kelly was talking about, as far as what you can do with the community development, with the comprehensive plan to start moving forward and helping your communities get stronger. So that's what I wanted to add too. So DCA does that as well. So,
Absolutely.
so talk with your regional rep around that, and when your next class is coming through. So, and we're at 19 minutes left, so we should answer some questions, because I'm sure that there are a lot of things going on. So, did you want to talk about this?
This slide reiterates what community leadership needs to do to impact the non-congregate shelter application. And we're going to post these online. We're going to post this webinar, the video of it, online, so that you can go back and you can reference these. This is our website for HOMEARP. So give you just a second to grab that QR code, or you can Google DCA HOMEARP and it'll come up. And then this is the link to sign up for our newsletter as well. And we push information out through that newsletter. Right now we're doing it between every week to every other week. And the closer we get to the grant opening up, the more information that we're going to be pushing out. And then as we get to the LITEC program for 2024, we'll be pushing information out through it. So make sure you go and you sign up. I'm going to leave that up, but let's go ahead and start talking about the questions.
Well, we have a few questions that have come through the chat. So why don't we talk about the application cycles for both non-congregate shelter and rental housing, and kind of what those look like, because we have some questions about the 2024 open date. And then awards being used toward a capital campaign. So organizations that have already started leveraging their funding, but what that looks like with the non-congregate shelters specifically, because they want to do transitional housing units. And so, which is a little bit different than, it's kind of in that middle section, the transitional housing piece. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, why don't you start with the non-congregate shelter
Okay.
timeline, and also about the timeline on how quickly they have to come online and be in service.
Okay, so for the non-congregate shelter, it's you, for those of you who are wanting to do the non-congregate shelter. So like Kelly talked about before, individual units, a bathroom and a door, not necessarily a kitchen, but access to one on site. Okay, so for that funding, and actually for all funding, you're going to have to get started building within a year. 6 months if it's, I think, just acquisition. I'm going to have to re-review that. That's a really good question. So you're going to want to get going right away. You have, depending on when you get started, you have 3 to 4 years to actually get everything built. Okay, so that means once you get the money, you've got to start, you've got to finish up all the environmentals, making sure all your P's and Q's are in line, getting the contractors and all of the, bricks and sticks actually in your location, and then start building. So you need to start moving forward on that right away. This isn't something that you get and you hold on to until you get the rest of the money. You should have all the money, get this, and then go. So this is the last piece, not the first. So just know that going in. For rental housing, it's going to be very similar just because it's partnered with a tax credit program. So that means you're going to have to get everything together and be, finish up all the logistics, but build as soon as possible. So, and then as far as transitional housing developments, non-congregate shelter, okay, that it's going to be a shelter. So individuals who are entering into it will be considered homeless. And then they cannot have a lease or pay towards their unit. The operational costs already need to be paid for by another means. Okay, so if you're doing rental housing, that's where you're having someone with a lease. Okay, so a permanent supportive housing, transitional housing model, we would have to kind of take a look at what your plans are for that in order to see what group your program would be best suited for. Is there anything else you guys can think of? Kelly, Jody?
No, that covered it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And you guys, if you want to raise your hands or unmute yourself to ask questions, now's the time to do that. We're getting some more questions here.
So Sandra Cathy asked the question about the capital campaign.
Right.
The issue with HOMEARP is that there is a timeline on how fast you have to get these units up and going. And so if you're in a capital campaign and this is the final push, and then you can start construction, then that's one scenario. And yes, as long as you can meet the deadline for when these units come online, then yes, that would be a great way for you to finish your funding. However, if you are in the middle of your capital campaign and you're talking about trying to hold these funds for a period of time to be able to finish the capital campaign out, then no, unless you're capable of meeting the deadlines that are in HOMEARP for bringing the property online, then no, you would not be able to pause construction to finish out your capital campaign program.